Has Nico Harrison secretly been cooking this entire time, or did he just get really lucky? The latter half of that statement is probably true, but the Dallas Mavericks are one of the most intriguing teams in the NBA. With the combination of Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, Anthony Davis, Cooper Flagg, and possibly Dereck Lively or Daniel Gafford, this is one of the best starting lineups even in a competitive Western Conference. Welcome to 30 Teams in 30 Days. If you're seeing this episode, that means we've been uploading for a week straight, so hooray! Let's get into this episode celebrating the Dallas Mavericks. Kyrie Irving is coming off of an ACL tear and will be gone for some time. He'll probably be returning around the All-Star break, but I hope he does come back later rather than sooner, just to preserve himself for the season and for his own longevity. So replacing him is going to be D'Angelo Russell. Now, the Mavericks got Russell on an incredibly team-friendly deal, so I am pretty excited to see that. However, Russell is also coming off of his worst year as a pro. That was the least amount of points he scored per game, even less than his rookie season. Russell is probably one of the most inconsistent players in the NBA who bounces back and forth between being an all-star guard and a guy who looks like he shouldn't be starting. But given the roster that he's on, I think he has a chance to have a solid bounce-back year. Because of guys like Klay Thompson and PJ Washington, he's not going to be required to do all the shooting. Because of guys like Dante Exum, Anthony Davis, Cooper Flagg, he's not going to be required to do all the playmaking. And because of guys like Flagg and Davis, he's not going to have to do all the shot creation either. So I think he's going to be able to fit quite comfortably into this team, at least until Irving returns. I think all that D'Angelo Russell has to do is keep them around 50%, keep them in striking of the playoffs or in the play-in tournament, and just captain the ship until Kyrie Irving comes back. Kyrie being Kyrie, I think is going to take care of himself, prioritize his own health first, and I think that means he's going to come back pretty well too. Klay Thompson is a bigger name than what he is now. He's going to be 35 at the end of the next season. He's coming off some pretty poor stats from last year, and he's regressing from an athletic, defensive, and even a little bit as a shooting standpoint. But still, it's Klay Thompson. He can shoot just under 40% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. Still insanely good by NBA standards. But there's no denying that he is a shell of himself, and part of me kind of thinks that it's a good thing that Warriors fans aren't having to watch him decline in the way that he is. Another veteran going alongside him is Anthony Davis. Now, Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis. He's one of the best players in the league. He's absolutely elite on defense, especially when he gets to play the 4 position alongside another center, and I expect that he's just going to be really good this year. Didn't really get to see him do a whole lot in Dallas, but he played 9 games and still had a game-winning shot. That's pretty impressive. Don't expect him to play the whole beginning of the season because it's Anthony Davis. I'm sure he's going to get injured, but it's also Anthony Davis. He's probably going to go on a stretch where he looks like a legitimate MVP candidate, get injured, and then miss 10 or 20 games. And then the Mavericks had the luxury of switching between Daniel Gafford and Dereck Lively, 2 of the best centers in the league, possibly the best center combination in the league, and 2 guys who had a PER of over 20 last year. Remember, a PER of 20 is what puts you in all-star conversation, so the fact that they had 2 centers do that is pretty impressive. Gafford is probably the slightly better center, and if you're focusing on winning, starting him is probably the better one, but I would really like to see them start Dereck Lively. Lively is going to be only 21, so if you want to prioritize him getting reps and development alongside playing Cooper Flagg especially, that's probably not the wrong move. And then going alongside that, they also have a really solid bench. I honestly think this bench might be able to defeat the Washington Wizards. I'm sorry, Washington fans. But at the point guard, they've got Dante Exum, one of the best stories in the NBA, and a guy who's a decent playmaker, gives you decent minutes. They've got Max Christie, who's a good player and is only going to be 22 years old. Going alongside him, Caleb Martin is not a bad backup wing. And then PJ Washington is the modern, undersized NBA center who is just great at 3-and-D. He was like a 38-39% shooter, and he was a good defender as well. On their own, if they stay healthy, Dallas has a pretty good roster that probably isn't getting enough attention just because they're in a stacked Western Conference. But red hasn't exploded yet because I have been yet to mention Cooper Flagg. The 18-year-old Cooper Flagg is one of the best prospects in all of NBA history. In my opinion, he's possibly a top 5 NBA prospect that we have ever seen. Flagg is one of the most NBA-ready players that we have seen since guys like Wemby, LeBron, or Anthony Davis. The combo forward is a talented shooter, playmaker, finesse, and power finisher while being an elite defender and having one of the most savvy basketball minds I've ever seen at this age. His rookie season is probably going to be the worst version we ever see of him, and I think his absolute floor is still that of a solid rotational player or even a starter. Few prospects in NBA history that go this high ever have so low of a floor, in my opinion. Of course, there are going to be some growing pains for Cooper Flagg. Now, I already talked about him at length in a previous video, so you should definitely go check that out, but I think he's going to have some issues. His shooting might be a little bit of a drop-off from what we saw in college, just as he's adjusting. His ball handling is definitely going to have to get better to make it work at the NBA level, and he's going to have to deal with not being the most athletic player on the court. But that's not the reason why he's going to be thrown into the fire. Dallas has had some reports that it looks like Jason Kidd might be playing him at the point guard position, or at least using him in a point forward role. Cooper Flagg was a pretty good passer at Duke, so I don't think that's going to be the unusual part for him. But being a starting point guard against NBA defenses is not easy. But this also isn't something new for Jason Kidd. Back in his time in Milwaukee, he did the same thing with Giannis Antetokounmpo. He did this in Giannis, I think it was like his 3rd or 4th year, and during that time, that is when Giannis broke out into the star today. Giving Giannis those point minutes made him an absolute beast, it made him a mismatch, and it made it why he's one of the better playmakers we've ever seen at someone at that size. So while it is going to be rough for Cooper Flagg, I think it is necessary for his career development just because we need forwards in the NBA to be able to playmake at a high level. But the good thing is Flagg can play that role without being heavily relied upon. He's got a guy like Anthony Davis who can also help play make. Kyrie Irving will eventually be back. Dante Exum can take over some of that. And then, of course, there is still D'Angelo Russell. So yes, he's going to get minutes at that, but he's not going to be relied upon it. Not to mention, Cooper Flagg, I think, has a really good roster surrounding him for a rookie. Flagg has guys like Irving and Davis and Klay to mentor him as a veteran. He's got shooters like Russell and Klay in Washington, and then he's got lob threats in Gafford and Lively. For a young forward in the NBA, this is one of the best combinations that you can have for both on and off the court development. Flagg is going to be just 19 at the end of the year. He's going to need that veteran leadership. This leads me to believe that the Dallas Mavericks are the biggest wild card in the NBA this year. Unless your name is Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, LeBron, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you're not going to have a big impact on winning. Historically, few rookies ever have without being a top 10 player. But with Flagg being one of the best prospects that we have ever seen, it's not unreasonable to think that he could have a legendary season, and most players who get drafted in the lottery, especially in the top 3, don't go on teams that could already be in the playoffs if they were healthy. If Davis stays healthy, if Kyrie comes back well, if Klay can fight off Father Time, if guys like Christie and Lively can make the development, and if D'Angelo Russell can hold the reins, things that I all totally think are possible, maybe not all of them, but I think a lot of those things are possible for the Mavericks, we could see a really intriguing roster. And if they get that right version of D'Lo, they're gonna have him coming off the bench, meaning he can come off, be that bench microwave, but if he doesn't play well, the Mavericks don't have to rely on him. Russell's been a starter for the majority of his career, but I think he might be perfect to go in the 6th man spot for Dallas. Nico's plan might just be coming together. In one way or another, he has made one of the most intriguing rosters in the NBA. Not just because of Cooper Flagg. Of course, Cooper Flagg is going to make people tune in, but because this is already a playoff level team. I think Dallas has a real chance at being one of maybe around that 7 to 10 seed in the West, just depending on how well they play without Kyrie Irving. The one thing I can confidently say about this Dallas team is that Texas basketball is completely back, and that is always good for the NBA. This has been 30 and 30. If you liked the video, you know what to do, and I will catch you all next time.